We've got a special guest for Sewing Discourse today. We're joined by Pardes.
And how do you pronounce your last name? Seleh?
Seleh.
Seleh.
Yeah, but it's actually Seleh is in Farsi. But I always, just got used to saying it like that, Seleh.
So you are a Jewish girl originally from Iran, well, ancestrally originally from Iran, living in California, or born in California.
Yeah, I was born in California, and now I live in Washington, D.C.
How many people watch you? Because you have a lot of followers. You have a YouTube, you have a Twitter, you live stream.
So I haven't done the live streams in about a month. But when I was doing the live streams, it was usually about like a few thousand, around like maybe 4,000 or 5,000 every night, to give or take, sometimes more, sometimes less. Because I mean, if you counted Periscope, YouTube, and Twitch, yeah, and sometimes more. I don't know.
What would you talk about with them?
Well, I would talk about just random things, like every night, something else, like dating advice, sometimes news of the day, what happened, Democratic debates, I don't know, something about myself. It's always different every night, but I usually try to not make it so political. And if it is political, like not partisan. And usually it's more of just like a discussion. And sometimes I'll have a guest on and we'll talk about whatever it is about, like a human interest sort of thing. Talk about that person, what that person does, or something interesting about them.
Did you start as a political commenter? Is that how it started?
I started working at Daily Wire. Like I started working for Ben Shapiro. That's where I got my start. I wrote a lot for his website. And then from there, that's where I started getting my following, like on Twitter and stuff like that.
Have you contributed to other sites besides the Daily Wire?
Mediaite, the Independent Journal Review, Red Alert, which is the college brand for the Washington Examiner. And I was an editor there too for the contributors, and Campus Reform Leadership Institute. And then I also worked at Fox, but I was more behind the scenes. I was a script writer.
That's an impressive resume. That's a great resume.
Yeah. And then I moved over to PR. And now I'm focused on school.
I've watched a number of your streams.
Really?
I of course, yeah. I'm a fan. That's why we got you on this show.
I am a huge fan of the Ben Shapiro clone that you had on.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wasn't that cool? Didn't that look exactly like him? People are still, last night someone was like, that's so cool that you had Ben Shapiro on your show.
Well, it was so grainy, the footage, that it looked like it may have been Ben Shapiro.
Yeah. And the way he talked.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Ben Shapiro.
I mean, Ben Shapiro is also in California. So would you say that that's a small clique of people who, let's say, are a little bit more conservative leaning, so they're able to find each other pretty quickly? And I don't know, like being in a community like that, did you find that it's harder to reach out to people who are, let's say, more on the left?
Yeah, the conservatives because I went to UCLA, the conservatives at my school were very connected. There was like everybody knew each other from the conservative side, but people on the left, I mean, everybody else is on the left, so it wasn't like they necessarily knew each other. It was just different. Oh no, everybody was like part of the Bruin Republicans. That was like the thing.
What does it mean to you that? So you're a conservative, but what does that mean to you? Because I've watched some of your streams, and there's a lot more nuance in the way you see the world than it seems what a cookie cutter conservative or what someone would imagine.
The truth is that, like, by the definition of conservative, I'm probably not conservative. Definitely, my views are a lot more to the left socially, or to the, like, just, I guess, libertarian socially. I don't know. The reason why I have been called a conservative, or have probably just, I think it was mostly just, I worked in conservative media for my whole like career life. So the pieces that I wrote were for conservative websites. So, and that was how I got introduced to politics, was through working for conservatives. So that was like the only perspective that I was exposed to in the beginning. But I think right now I'm still kind of like developing my political worldview, which is why I stepped away from it a little bit, just so I can kind of form my own. And I try to be nuanced just because I don't think that there's any other way that I'm going to conclude with what my beliefs are.
That's a smart way of going about it, especially if a lot of people do get very entrenched in the way that they see the world. Just like with any kind of scientific discovery, people feel like, okay, we know everything, there's no more to learn.
Yeah.
So it is very important to do that. Like, I'm trying to do that too every day. Well, now, even with, there was recently this whole controversy with Turning Point USA and the
Yeah.
Groyper army, as they're calling
Oh
it, who
my
were going
gosh.
in, asking very controversial questions. And but at the end of the day, like, what I would wish would have happened, which obviously did not, is they could have said on stage, you know what, all the questions that you have, we are going to
Yeah.
answer them. We are going to go bit by bit by bit. We're not going to censor anything.
There's trolls, there's like lighthearted hijinks, and then there are like vehement racists. And I think the Groypers do rally around Fuentes.
All of the points that they're bringing up have to be sorted through with a fine-tooth comb so that we actually see what exactly are they about. Why are people attracted to them so much? And I
He's
think once
anti-Israel, which is stupid, right? Because that is self-destructive to America even. Like Israel is one of our, if not our most important ally. Their placement in the Middle East is essential. If you don't know other people's positions, you don't know your own position. You can't just
well, that's my
be
whole point.
isolationist
That's
to the
why I
point
want to
of
take
self-destruction.
that's why I want to
Like,
take the worst
Israel
things.
is really important.
Well, the only reason why I'm not saying anything is because I know Nick. And for a while I kept, well, I'm not going to comment on Nick, but the Groypers in general. I was defending the Groypers, for a period of time, and I was saying, why aren't they being allowed to speak? Um, and like, they're just online trolls, and like they people should be able to criticize Israel and whatever, and I'm pro-Israel, but I think people should be able to criticize Israel, and I still think they should be able to speak, and I still think people should be able to criticize Israel, but I'm not going to defend the Groypers anymore
He is
because
allowed to speak. He is allowed to
no,
speak.
I just came at it from a perspective of really not understanding the Groypers or knowing them. So I came in thinking, oh, well, this is just a group of people who are interested and they want to know. But like, I mean, at this point, I actually do feel like they don't want debate. I don't feel like they want debate. So I'm gonna like let them do their thing, but I'm not gonna try and understand them, because I don't think that they even know anything about Israel, or even know, some of them don't even know what Israel is or how Israel, they just know that Israel is a Jewish thing. Like literally that's all they know. So yeah, I don't know.
They remind me of the Occupy Wall Street, the Tea Party, and the Groypers in terms of, if I was an exploitive documentarian, like I could go to the Groypers, I could go to the Tea Party movement, or I could go to the Occupy Wall Street, like Jimmy Kimmel or Jay Leno, and like ask layup questions and then cherry pick the people that don't have a clue. And basically say, like, look, this is a movement without coherence. There's a bunch of people that don't know what's going on. They're all angry about different things. They all articulate themselves different ways. So like, this isn't even worth like your attention or taking seriously, and we should mock it and deride it and just ignore it wholesale. Like a lot of the Groypers wear xenophobia on their sleeves, and that's how they provoke you or just shut down debate. Or they're like, yeah, I am xenophobic. Like, ha, 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 ha. Like, what are you going to do about it? It's like they're drunk or something.
Maybe this is maybe this is me taking a step too far here, but I imagine that the way that the Groypers get empowered has everything to do with the reaction to them. For example, when Charlie Kirk had that event, there was a dude who was sitting next to him who started talking about Cardi B as a deflection to whatever was
Mhm.
going on. So I see something like that, people grab onto that and say like, hey, like they don't want to talk about this stuff, where I feel like if every single points that they were making was addressed on like a Tim Dillon, like I don't know if you know who Tim Dillon is, but Tim Dillon is a comedian who I think is able to find a sweet spot between being honest, talking about a lot of these events, and at the same time not somebody who's xenophobic or turning people off. I think that there is more room out there for the Tim Dillons of the world to take a lot of things, whether we're talking about Mossad or whatever, and just talking with them on a very, you know, non-intrusive, you know, very calm, collected, and sober manner. You know, like, okay, what are the worst points that these people are bringing up? Let's examine them and compare them with, you know, like, if we didn't do this or that, like, what would be the other choice we would have to make? You know, why is this necessarily, like, as far as talking about Israel or talking about any kind of policy when it comes to, do we go into this country? Do we go into that country? Do we help out these neighbors of ours? What would be the consequences of not doing that? And let's just be very honest and open and balance everything out. And if that's not done, I think that the tensions are only going to escalate, because there are going to be a lot of people out there who are going to think, why are they deflecting? Why are they not talking about this? And I don't think that's going to be healthy for anybody.
So personally, I don't want to be the person trying to answer any of these, and I have been that person for a while with my own group of people, and I have a lot of friends who are, you know, kind of in that sort of movement. And I was that person who was like, oh, let's try to understand everything question that everybody has, and try and let's try and work through it together. But so I don't want to be that person anymore, but I do think there should be those people out there.
Wasn't your role, didn't you used to have a role where you would be looking for anti-Semites and calling them
Yeah.
out? So what was
Yeah.
that role?
So
What
that's
was,
when I first started, and then I kind of, so when I first started, I was working, David Horowitz was the owner of the first website that I wrote for, and he had something called Jew Hatred on Campus, and it was like a paper slash like organization slash basically just call for donations basically. And like we would look for instances of anti-Semitism on college campuses, so we can call it out and write a piece about it, or like write a petition to the dean or the school or whatever. So I was an intern in that sort of thing, and later on it bothered me that I was part of that also, because
why?
I didn't think, well, because I don't like the idea of looking for hate, looking for people that are looking for instances of hate in certain people so you can destroy their life. You know what I mean?
Like the Southern Poverty Law Center, right?
Yeah, like that. Exactly the same idea. Like if you're an anti-hate group, first of all, the whole idea of anti-hate, just be pro-love, like don't be anti-hate. But if you're an anti-hate group, you want to avoid doing things that are hateful, even if it's to people that you deem as hateful. You don't want to be the person doing the hateful thing, because every person who's done something hateful said, oh, well, that other person was hateful first, I'm just being hateful back. And it's like, so there's no, that person started it. If you're engaging in a hateful activity, then that's on you. Doesn't matter who started doing the hateful thing.
You got to be like Daryl Davis. If you don't know about Daryl Davis, he was a blues musician who befriended members of the KKK and got them all to take off their hoods.
Wow, interesting.
And he was also at this Minds event. So Minds.com, headed up by Bill Ottman. It's this really interesting social network that I'm a part of. It's kind of like a
oh yeah, I know Bill.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Bill Ottman had an event with Tim Pool and several other people, including Daryl Davis. It was supposed to take place at this theater, but the theater got threats from Antifa that said that they were going to burn it down, or it may have been just like one email that they got. So they decided, regardless of the contract that they had with them, to not do this event, not host this event. And so he had to find another last minute venue, which he ended up doing. But still, it just goes to show you how strong it is that like, I don't think people are as concerned about Sargon of Akkad showing up to your venue and hurling, flaming arrows at it or whatever, like that's not the person who you'd be scared of. But people are scared of people on the left right now, which I also think can only be undone by having close personal conversation with more people, because online it's just a shit show. People are flinging poo at each other left and right.
They're also being instigated to be that hateful. Like, people will sound the alarms on Sargon of Akkad in those communities where they're saying, like, this guy is threatening, like, your existence. Like, so you have, like, that's what Destiny was saying. Like, Hassan Piper's best friend, Destiny, where I watched him on video advocate, like, multiple different ways, explicit violence against conservatives. He was like, I think people should show up and commit unambiguous violence against conservatives. I hate conservatives. I think they're stupid.
You genuinely do hate conservatives, don't you?
Very much so. Like I've moved full on to like the political violence level, or the real violence level, when it comes to conservative people. Yeah, I think they need to be like excised from my fucking country. I think they are demonstrably fucking evil people by any moral system that most people would use. And then I just hate them because they tend to destroy the outcomes related to this country, which is what I'm concerned with. Yeah, absolutely.
And it was like so hardcore and blatant. I was like, what the hell is this guy thinking? And it was just insane and so backwards. It just seems like he's got it so wrong, and it's such a shame because he's so extraordinarily wealthy. It just seems like he's dealing with his own self-hatred and his own guilt, and he's just projecting it on others.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned, like, no one's afraid of Sargon of Akkad and stuff like that. I would rather be in a group of like non-threatening anti-Semitic people in a room than to be with people who are of the mentality of like, go punch a Nazi. You know what I mean? Because it's all words right now. Like, the worst threat, the worst thing that you can call somebody is a Nazi right now. So people who use the word Nazi aren't.
I think it's almost lost its meaning, to be honest.
Yeah, and it's like anybody that you hate, the worst thing is basically Nazi. So like the worst person. Yeah, and it's like if you think that you have to fight the Nazis, you're basically saying that about the worst person. Don't necessarily mean actual Nazis, because there aren't actual Nazis.
Well, and inversely, that's what's going to make middle schoolers start drawing swastikas everywhere, because they know this is the edgiest thing it could possibly do. Like, I'm seeing that a lot of the Groypers, as we talked about before, I wonder how many of them are just like really dumb young people.
That's an old Hindu symbol.
Oh yeah.
It's like the same people that want the permanent N-word pass. It's like the same emotional exfoliation needs to, like, that same trauma needs to be healed for people to just not be triggered by a symbol. Like, people should be vigilant, and people should be pro-love, like you said, instead of anti-hate. I think that's a very, I like that. I'm going to adopt that terminology, because I think it's not just semantics. I think there really is a profound distinction there in being pro-love instead of anti-hate.
To borrow from the Zoroastrians, pro-Ahura Mazda, anti-Ahriman. I don't know if you got into the mythology of Iran, but since you mentioned before that your family, did your family come from Iran originally, or you came from Iran?
Yeah, my family's from Iran. I actually was born in LA. I have never been to Iran, but My parents escaped like right after the revolution, and
Wow.
they lived in Austria for a little bit. That's how they got their visas to get to the United States, and they moved after that.
And how long did they live in Iran? Because I know that the Jews were expelled from Spain in 1492. Columbus sailed the ocean blue. But before that, they were also exiled in Babylon after the first temple was destroyed. And which would you say, like, which part would you say your family is from as far as the Jewish people goes?
Well, they were there, yeah, from the time they were there from the beginning. Their families. They lived in a city that was there for since the time after the Second Temple, right around the Second Temple, when the Jews, the Babylonian, they never actually went to Israel.
Mm.
It was those people, and
So they were the Jews who were basically thinking like, you know what, this is fine. We don't need to go anywhere. We don't need to start over. You know, let's just stick, because it was a good place to live in during that time. That was
Yeah.
around the time of after Sargon the Great. Sorry, what am I talking about? After Cyrus the Great?
So,
Yes, we were talking about Sargon before. After Cyrus the Great, you had this great empire being built up by all the subsequent people, where they had a system of credit, they had a pony express, they had guard stationed everywhere. So it was like the first, you could say, world empire, if you don't count like China or the Americas. So I wouldn't be surprised if during that time, why would you go over to this fledgling place where you have to build this temple again and you have to start all over and you have to participate in all these different traditions? Because Zionism, like to go into this land and to participate in it, it does take a lot of sacrifice and energy. And that's always been fascinating to me. Like the Zionist projects that have occurred throughout history, it was two of them really. It was the time of Cyrus the Great. That was the first Zionist project. And then it's right now after World War II. So it's all very fascinating to me, like the way that history works together with the Jewish people and how history repeats itself. Because back then, in the book of Esther, they also talk about how there was a conspiracy to annihilate all of the Jews that were living in Iran during that time in
Is
Babylon.
that Purim? Is that the story of Purim?
yeah.
I know Purim. That's like the Jewish Halloween, right? Isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, with the dressing up, that aspect of it, everybody dresses up, and there's a lot of drinking.
What I could have sworn I saw Nassim Taleb compare Zionism to Wahhabism.
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 I don't really see the comparison at all, really. I mean,
I don't know so much about Wahhabism.
well, Wahhabism was considered to be a Muslim revival, where they were getting back to the good old religion of yore, and a lot of it did involve being much more legalistic, much stricter in how you're observing all these religious laws. I would say that Zionism is for some people who are, let's say, conservative Jews, Hasidic people, they were always like that. But Zionism, especially in the beginning, it was more of kind of like a socialistic thing in a way.
Yeah.
And the Soviet Union supported Israel in the very beginning until Israel basically told them to fuck off. And then they started disseminating a lot of anti-Israeli propaganda. So if you guys are curious where the most anti-Israel hate has come from, it has come from, I believe, the Soviet Union. They were the ones who were paying a lot of money to spread a lot of these anti-Israel sentiments back in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And a lot of them were also helping out the Arabian countries and fighting against Israel.
Interesting. I had no idea.
Because who's that girl? Eve Peiser. She's anti-Zionist, and then Jacob Wall is pro-Zionist, and they're both Jewish people. I would love to know more about that dialogue. Like, what's the deal? I don't get Zionism. Is like, because you can be pro-Israel and anti-Zionist. Can you? Like, I don't get it.
Yeah, there's a lot of pro-Israel, anti-Zionists. First of all, I grew up in a pro-Israel, anti-Zionist education system. My parents didn't care. They were pro the Israeli government and everything, but the school system that I was in was very anti-Zionism, even though they were pro-Israel as as a Jewish land that the Jews will go back to, and the time
When
of
the
the
Messiah comes.
Right, exactly. But they also believed, my school was Satmar, so they believed that there shouldn't be an Israeli government right now because Jews are still in diaspora, and any government that is established right now is going to be a secular government. So they're also the Zionist government because they see the Zionist government as an attempt to secularize Jews who are Haredi.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, when it was the Jewish national holidays, the Israeli national holidays, when I was studying in Israel, our principal had us stay animated during those sirens that, when they had those sirens during like Yom HaZikaron or Yom HaAtzmaut, the Israeli Independence Day, and everyone's supposed to stop and put their hand on their heart, or not hand, whatever. People stop in respect of for a minute to remember Independence Day or remember the Holocaust Day.
Mm-hmm.
So we stayed animated. It was like a form of protest to show that we don't recognize the
Interesting
Zionist government. Yeah.
So how can you be pro-Israel, anti-Zionist?
Because
isn't pro-Israel, doesn't that mean like...
Well, it's a form of millennialism, right? Basically, when there is this end of the world scenario, the Messiah is supposed to come. The graves that are in this, please remind me if you know the name of that grave site, like the really famous one. I think so.
Har Hazeitim, Mount Olive, the Olive Mount.
yes, exactly. So in that specific area, they're supposed to rise from the dead from that particular grave site, and there is supposed to be this big end of the world scenario where finally after the Messiah comes, the sacrifices can start again, as far as like the sheep and goats and all the stuff that they used to do back during the after the Exodus from Egypt.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
Yeah.
Am I getting everything right?
Yeah. How long have you guys known each other for? I know
2
that's
years?
so random.
4?
4 years? No, like 3.
Well, because I met you when I met Matt Kahn.
Mm-hmm. Well, I met Jules.
Meetup.
Yes, I went to the meetup, and I remember that was the time when I was still smoking weed. So when I went outside the train station, I had no idea how to get there. I was just going on one block and another block and then going back the other way around. So I was totally blasted, and I am very thankful that Jules saw in me something that resonated with him.
You were talking, you started talking about Thomas Sowell. I'm in New York City.
Yeah.
And you're talking about basic economics, Thomas Sowell, and you were in the art world. You're like, oh yeah, I went to SBA, I went to art school, I'm an animator, and I love Thomas Sowell. And I was like, you don't exist. I was like, that doesn't exist anywhere. Right?
That's what happens when I get high. I start talking about Thomas Sowell and basic economics.
Because I felt like a pariah at NYU because I stuck out like a sore thumb in terms of they would see me as a contrarian, where I would try to say, hey, everyone seems like everyone's taking socialism. Like everyone I knew went they're like, oh yeah, we're taking the socialism class. Like, we love socialism. Like we love Marxism. And I would step all over my own toes, trying to engage with a lot of people, and it didn't help me be popular in art school. And I wanted to make art to positively impact the world through stories. And I was like, everyone seems obsessed with, worshiping the state and creating a Plato's perfect republic. And, I was
just like you all know a Harari.
These are all the culture generators coming out of NYU. So it was very apparent to me that there was diversity, at NYU Film School, but there wasn't diversity of thoughts at all. Like you had like, that was it. And except for me, and everyone just saw me as the asshole model Upper East Side Republican kid. And it didn't win me any sympathy points. I got a lot of resentment for it, and I would meet a lot of that by puffing my feathers and being confrontational. And I think I had to learn to temper myself a lot and to submit a lot more and to gracefully lose arguments or just bow out and not participate, even though my heart really wanted to share light. Like I was like, I'm on your side. Like I love you guys. Like I want to work with you guys. I want to, like, it's not about, I'm more interested in being right. So I'm not afraid to be wrong. Like I've changed my mind on so many things over the course of my life. Like I think truth is beauty, and I don't have any ego attachment to ideas. Like I want to be the type of person who prioritizes error detection and self-correction. So, but anyway, I digress. So I met Lev. He was talking about basic economics, Thomas Sowell, and the second he told me he went to art school, I knew he had a similar experience. I learned subsequently because he told me he had a similar experience in college. But I knew that without him even telling me, because I was like, if you're here in this city and you went to art school and you're just met someone and you're out of the gate talking about this stuff, like I just know what you must have gone through to even have the moxie to try that out as an opener.
Well, it's a very important pressure to have. I mean, to circle back on what we were talking about before with the Jewish people, I almost feel like if Jews didn't have the pressure that they did throughout history, as far as people always excluding them, then I doubt Jews would even be here today. You know, I think that they would just all integrate with everybody else. And whether or not this whole thing, like, I don't know what the truth is, nobody does, but if this whole thing is a simulation, as far as there is a certain thing that all of us are going to experience, there is a certain lesson that we're trying to learn here, then this whole horrible exclusion and deridements and abuse that has gone on to the Jewish people for all this time, and it's still going on today, it's almost like that is a pressure from which my hope is that something beautiful and something transformational is going to happen in this world. And there is this Kabbalist, Michael Lightman, who talks about that a lot, about how the Jewish people have this, almost like, according to him, have this responsibility towards the rest of the world. And the reason why the rest of the world is always putting pressure on the Jews is because they know that they are capable of giving the world something that's going to benefit it to such a great extent, but they're not giving it yet. And the only way that they could give it is if all the Jews, I mean, this is what he says, I don't necessarily know if this is true or not, but if all the Jews were to combine together and transform their egoism into altruism, and teach the world how to transform their egoism into altruism. And the more that you start rising above just this very basic human need for, you know, not just creature comforts, but also something as deep as, you could say, like love, for instance. I had a dream where I saw this rabbi, may have been the same guy I just mentioned, I don't know, or just some random rabbi. And this rabbi told me that there are two kinds of evil. That one kind of evil is when you intentionally do something to harm another human being. But the other kind of evil is pretty much anything that you do in your daily life, even when you do something good for somebody else, you're still doing it to get something out of it yourself. And that's what Nietzsche also talked about, where he criticized people who are like moral and upstanding and all that, because we're still getting something out of it. So I just find that to be a very interesting concept in the Kabbalah, where it's about transmuting that quality and getting to a higher level, where they say the state of the creator is one of giving without wanting anything in return. So I don't know. I just find that to be interesting.
I think that doesn't vibe with me as far as the two different types of evil. I really like how Richard Dawkins described the selfish gene in his he says he wished he had titled it "The Selfish Gene Drives the Altruistic Vehicle." I think that evil. I have a much more Buddhist idea of evil in terms of I think ignorance is evil. Like I think the statement "I don't want to understand" is evil, and I've encountered that. In fact, there's a book, Nymphomaniac, is that by Lars von Trier, where like one of the characters in a fight is like screaming like, "I don't want to understand." Like she's intransigent in a fight with someone, and the person's like trying to like resolve conflict, and she's like, "I don't want to understand," and that's fucking evil. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people who are atheists, if you tell them doing things out of self-interest is evil, like you will perpetuate what you said the Jewish people need to evolve from, in terms of if they need to teach others how to uplift themselves and how to help others, like you need to activate their self-interest in an altruistic way. And wanting to receive benefits from acting in your self-interest couldn't be more common sense. Like helping others helps you, period.
I wholeheartedly agree, but I can tie what you just said
That's
together
not
with
evil.
Buddhism too. Because Buddhism always talks about how no matter how many things you're doing in your life, it's never going to be enough. You're always going to want something more. So I see that not being so much as evil as I interpreted it in my dream from what the rabbi said.
There's nothing wrong with wanting more. Like I think you should figure out how to get a positive feedback loop, right? Like, for example, I think religion often answers for people a sense of higher purpose, right? And answer the question of why are we here? And I think you can also create one for yourself. Like for me, it's very simple. It's be happy, spread happiness, be the best you can be, right? And if I'm not happy, I'm not very good at spreading happiness. And if I'm not being the best I can be, I can't sustain happiness, right? So that positive feedback loop doesn't mean like I'm not going to want more stuff down the road, but it also means like you can easily enjoy asceticism or just like be grateful for little things, like just being alive, just the air, you know, just for nature. You walk outside, you look at the trees, you smell the flowers, you know, like those things, like life often is about how you look at it. Like you can look at a blade of grass and see something mundane, or you can like look at it and see a miracle and like all the cell walls and this like engineering marvel of like life, and you can just like really go down the rabbit hole with something as simple as a blade of grass, and like that's going to enhance your enjoyment of life magnitudes more than, you know, chasing rock star happiness, right? Which is, I feel like, is what you're talking about. Like when, like there's 3 levels of happiness, right? I need this now, and then I'll be happy. I need this new car. I need this new house. I need whatever.
Well,
like, that's rock star happiness, and it's.
I wouldn't necessarily say that
fast.
though. Like the problem with what I'm talking about is that the state I'm describing is not a state I have ever been in, nor do I know anybody who's ever been in it. I'm basically talking about a state that once I get there, I'd be able to feel it, but I still don't even think I'd be able to describe it. And then
it sounds like a noble lie.
Maybe it is. I don't know. That's the open question for me right now, because that's the proposition that these Kabbalists are making.
It's like Plato's theory of forms.
I don't know. Pardes, what do you think?
I like what you said about ignorance being evil. It's just going back to what you were saying earlier, Jules, about the Buddhist idea. First of all, I didn't know that was a Buddhist idea. Also, I do believe in everybody having good intentions and that not being good enough. The road to hell, right? It's paved with good intentions. And I also believe in who am I to say what good and evil is? Like, who am I to say that I know what your intentions are as a person, or that I know what they should be? So ignorance, like not wanting to know, I think I would agree is like probably the worst idea from that. The problem I have in general, the problem I had with like religion growing up was always that it was all words. It was like, as long as you say that it's for God, or as long as you say that you're doing it for the greater good or for a mitzvah or for this or for that, then you were kind of like let off the hook.
Pardes, thank you so much for being on our show. We really appreciate it.
Oh, I enjoyed, and I really enjoyed talking to you guys.